I've spoken earlier about the difference between information and information technology in manufacturing, and how the Purdue model can give a framework for manufacturing information. In this video, I want to discuss an alternative approach to conceptualizing the Purdue model and IS-95 to better understand them. What I like to do is to label information about the plant operations into two major parts: information on production control and information on process control. By production control, I'm referring to things like processing sales orders into production orders, scheduling the production, planning and procuring raw materials, deciding what type of resources to use depending on availability of machines and people, ensuring quality on the product. By process control, I'm referring to things like having control on the temperature, mixing time, regulating mixing speed, regulating pressure in a tank with pumps and valves, proper dosage, controlling operational steps, and making sure that you're following the recipe to ensure proper quality. One way of looking at it can be that production control is about making the right thing, and process control is about making the thing right. If you have made a perfect cup of coffee, it won't help if the customer ordered hot chocolate. However, if you got the order right, it won't help if you left the chocolate too long on the stove and it got burnt. You didn't make the thing right. To be clear, on process control, I'm not talking about the health of your assets that are being used. There is a difference between monitoring the temperature of your product, for example, ensuring a stable temperature while mixing chocolate, and to monitor the condition of your assets used in producing a chocolate bar. For example, monitoring the winding temperature of a motor that is actuating the mixer. Both could give off an alarm against a set temperature in, i.e., your SCADA, but one would be about monitoring the quality of your product, while the other would be about monitoring the condition of your asset, i.e., condition monitoring. And although these alarms would probably be supported by the same controller and same supervisory system, and even in the same alarm view, the stakeholders would typically be different people. Issues with assets would probably have to be addressed by maintenance, and if it's persistent, it could be addressed by engineering. And issues with products and production would be more relevant for the area responsible and/or the quality manager. So now that we've gotten an idea about the differences of production and process control, I'd like to divide them into two again. High level and long-term production control, for example, materials requirements planning. Detailed and short-term production control, for example, planning production of goods on different time slots for different lines, as you can see on the right here. Supervisory process control, for example, supervising the process through a SCADA, ensuring that all parts operate smoothly. And direct process control, here represented by the most generic model I can find. You have some kind of sensor, for example, a level transmitter in a tank, sending information to the logical controller, for example, PLC, giving instructions to a final element. So instrument air can open and close a process valve, relieving the tank. These four levels might remind you of the functional hierarchy described in Purdue and IS-95, as you can see here on the right. What I've done is to group level 3 and 4 and label it production control, and group level 1 and 2 and label it process control. The point I'm trying to make is that it might be easier to wrap your head around IS-95 and Purdue if you think of level 3 and 4 as more like each other and level 1 and 2 as more like each other. Another way of thinking about it is that high-level production control is about establishing what creates value, what products have been sold or are expected to sell. Detailed production control is figuring out how to create value. When do I produce this? What equipment should we use? Who should supervise, etc. Supervisory control I like to think of as having the overall control of your value creation, while direct process control is more about the actual value creation, the transformation of raw materials into finished goods. There are, of course, other ways of value creation, such as improving the value of your assets, i.e., your plant. For example, the way you organize your equipment and your digital systems can gain a competitive advantage and improve the value of your enterprise. Another way of value creation could be creating new products or new approaches to making the products. But what I'm talking about in this context is the day-to-day production of what goods you are creating and selling. To be clear, what you see on the right here is from a standard. What you see on the left is a way of thinking about the standard. For example, the Purdue model considers engineering and maintenance as part of level 3. In the way I'm talking about production control, I'm more concerned with operational planning and operational control. The reason for this is that I think it's meaningful to separate them into what type of value creation they are doing. And maintenance and engineering, I think more of something that is about avoiding value loss on your assets and enhancing the value of your assets. Some may think it's a problem coming up with other ways of dividing the levels, but I disagree. These are just taxonomies. They're just ways of grouping and thinking about information. What is important though, is that whether you prefer to talk about process and production control, or ERP, MES, SCADA, or business planning and operations, MOM, and batch control, what matters is that you have a clear idea about what functions and interfaces you are talking about. If not, the terms loses substance and meaning. Okay, I think I'll end it here. I'll probably follow up with some more even in-depth on Purdue and maybe something about MRP2 and ERP. If you have comments or input, please leave them in the comment section, and until next time.